when things don't work out? Are you pointing the finger at yourself? Or are you saying, you know what? God only knows what was happening that I don't know about. And honoring that there's going to be pieces of the puzzle that we don't know. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo, and I'm so glad you're here. Today is episode number 53, and we are going to talk about what to do when things don't work out. But I'm actually going to spend a great amount of time talking about how do we set ourselves up for those high stakes things that we want, whether it's the relationship, whether it's the job, whether it's the house, whatever the thing is, because that's a huge part of the process for making it easier to handle when things don't work out the way that we want. There's a couple of reasons why I want to talk about this today. One of the big ones is because, as I've mentioned in a previous podcast episode, I had the pleasure of competing in a storytelling competition. I was a finalist in the New York City chapter, and spoiler alert, I did not make it to the next round. So what do we need to do when things don't work out? That's what we're going to talk about today, whether it's a competition, whether it's a job interview, whether it's anything that just didn't work out the way you wanted. This episode is for you. But before we jump in, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, and I founded Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I do the work to help you get unstuck in your job or your career. I do this through one-on-one coaching, group facilitation, and also keynote speaking and the like. So if you want to learn more about what I do, you can visit CoachTosca.com. That's CoachTosca.com. All righty then. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this process of getting ready for this competition, but I really want you to think about it in terms of anything that's important to you, anything that you're going after. This could apply to job interviews. This could apply to big projects that you have coming up, whatever. I think some of the principles are the same. So just to go back a little bit to the beginning, if you missed the episode, when I saw the storytelling competition come through, I immediately dismissed it because I don't really care for competitions. I don't look at my work as a competitive sport. I'm really all about impact and moving people. And so I was like, competition just was an immediate no for me. Then, long story short, I ended up reframing it. And my intuitive sense was go do this thing and make it be about you playing bigger in your life, you honoring that you want to be on big stages and helping a lot of people, and honoring that my personal stories matter and they have impact. So I reframed it for myself. When I actually submitted that video to be in the competition, to me, that was the win. I was like, you know what? No matter what happens, this was all about me putting my hat in the ring, me reframing this whole thing. But then what happened was I was selected as a finalist. And then it was like, oh my gosh, wow. It felt like a sign. It felt like validation. I was elated. So then I had to figure out, okay, well, like what now? And there was about 2.5, 3 weeks between finding out I was a finalist and having to perform that 5-minute talk live. One of the very first things that I did was really assess, what do I need? And what I found out about myself is that I need things that will help me visualize who I'm going to be in that moment of crunch time. So for me, I was like, oh, yep, I definitely got to make that hair appointment because it was time anyway. And I needed to pick out an outfit, like what was the vibe I was going for. And one of the other things was because this was about me stepping into my bigness, because this was about me calling in what I want to do in my career and my life, I also decided, you know what I'm going to do? Because this competition was going to be recorded. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get my makeup professionally done because I want to show up, I want to feel good, and I want those photos to be ones that I can really use for my portfolio. And that was also about giving myself permission to have fun with it. Like, wouldn't it be fun to just kind of get my makeup done? Gosh, I've had 2 times in my entire life that I've had my makeup professionally done, if you can believe that one. My wedding, and I got it done when I was recording a keynote of mine. And not only that, my friends, but I was like, you know what? I want to make sure I really like my makeup. And when I got it done the last time, I wasn't super, super in love. So I called the makeup artist, Amber. She's freaking amazing. I was like, Amber, can we do a practice run? Because I just really want to make sure that it's what I want. And so I did that. So not only did I get the practice run in, but I also used that day to feel really good about myself. Like it just so happened that I got my hair and makeup done on the same day. And rather than sit at home with my hair and makeup done with nowhere to go, my beautiful friend said to me, well, let's just go out and about and just enjoy it. And I so love that. It wasn't about me strutting my stuff. It wasn't about, hey, look at me. It was like, gosh, I'm all done up. Let me enjoy myself. And so we did. And then actually, something really, I don't know what I consider miraculous happened. I had been looking for a new pair of eyeglasses for like a year. And we ended up walking into an eyeglass place and found the most perfect pair of new glasses. So I think there's a little story in there too, right? About when we give ourselves permission to enjoy ourselves when we're in that tone and that feeling and that vibe of what we're calling in, like we attract more good things. That's kind of how I took that whole experience. So, okay, so those were some of those more externally focused things. How do I get myself really ready to be on stage and be a performer? The next thing I was considering was okay, like what kind of support do I need? Like expert support. So it's a 5-minute story, which is very different than like creating a keynote, right? A 45-minute arc, all the things. So I said, you know what? Like this isn't something that I've done a ton of, right? Performing like a 5-minute story. So I decided to invest in myself and call my keynote coach and say, hey, could you help me with this story? And her name is Julie Fogg, and she's a part of Vital Voice Training. If you ever need support, she's incredible. She's a co founder. And I reached out to her. I said, hey, would you be willing to like help me out with this? And she was like, I'd absolutely love to. And let me tell you, that was such an important part of my prep. I can't even. The other piece was, what do I need support for on the day of? And I realized, you know what? It's a new-ish network for me, this association. And yeah, maybe it would be great to have a ride or die with me. My best friend came, and that again turned out to be really helpful to have somebody that was just really, really in my corner on the day of. My husband also ended up coming because he isn't always able to come and support the work that I do. It's not like he's jumping on my coaching calls and being like, oh my God, that was such a good coaching session. So that was lovely. And then the other thing that I assessed that I needed was calendar space. What I've learned about myself and when I'm preparing for things is that I need to feel spacious for preparation of things. If you can imagine what I need for a keynote and then what I need for a 5 minute, again, and this kind of goes a little bit to my philosophy on practice like you play. I did a LinkedIn post about this, which is like, go all in, right? Put your best foot forward. And that's really what I wanted to do here as well. So that kind of is my assessment of what do I need? How do I set myself up for success to show up in a way that I want? And that kind of leads me to the next piece, which is like, what was my intent? Yeah, it's a competition. Sure, it would be lovely to win, but that's also out of my control. So, what is my intent and what are my goals that I can control? This is a big philosophy of mine about how we set goals in a way that no matter what happens, we can look and say, did I do my part? Yeah, my intent was to do my best. My intent also was to have fun. Maybe I fell a little short on that one leading up to it, but I'll talk more about that later. But my intent was, you know what? I'm happy just to have made it this far. And so I just want to have fun with the experience and have fun with the other contestants and the folks that were going to be there to witness it. My intent was also to dive into the work. I looked at this as like a real opportunity to improve upon my storytelling skills. And so I really, like I said, like I hired that coach and I was like, yeah, let me see how I can make an improvement from the video submission. And then the other intent was around continuing that process of getting out of my own way, the whole process of reframing competition and kind of learning more about my process in preparing for big things and seeing what else there was for me to discover, even in sharing this story on a bigger stage. From a technical perspective, my intent was about making sure I was building a story with a through line that really served the audience, that also served my goals and the criteria for the competition. And my other intent was around my inner work, deeply excavating what was there for me to learn about myself, what I wanted to offer the world with this story. And eventually, actually, I realized that it was going to be an audience voting situation. And that was kind of just a couple days before the competition. And that was a new layer of coming back to my intent because I was like, oh, audience voting. And that feels like a popularity contest. So I had more inner work to do around letting that go and actually writing a story about what that meant before the story was even written, right? Because, there's a story in my head about, I don't win popularity contests and things of that nature. Because my assumption too was the audience isn't going to have the same criteria that were used to be selected to be a finalist. So there was all of that. And I had to come back to my intent of I'm here to have fun. I'm here to do my best. I'm here to develop my skills and put my best foot forward. So that's kind of the second piece. Now, on the day of, I really had to do a lot of letting go. Letting go of trying to do it right, trying to follow a script, trying to control what I actually said on stage. I really had to get out of my head and get into my body. Such a big part of showing up on stage embodied and really from a heart centered space, not from a head space, from a space that I can touch people emotionally. For me that day, I was just really paying attention to what do I need. And the beautiful thing is, I had set up the makeup artist to come early, and she has such great vibes. Amber was amazing. And that was a huge part of getting my day started right because I knew I had the right support there. I also listened to great music. I even did some dancing in my office. And I also had previously asked a couple friends for like prayers, and so those were happening on the day of. Also, I gave myself permission to decide in the moment, do I want to take an Uber into the city or do I want to take the subway, which was going to feel better, which was going to feel more spacious. And I ended up deciding I'm just going to take the subway. And then also on the day of, I made sure I arrived really early to feel into the space, to give myself that time to say, okay, like, what is this space? And I'm so glad I did because actually the space that I thought it was going to be in was not the space that it was in. So then I had to wrap my arms around that. And so these are all the things, right, that we set ourselves up for success, for having the kind of outcomes that we want, right? All right. So then a few minutes before the three of the competitors were going on stage, we found out what order we were in. I was the third of three. And what was interesting was that we were back to back to back, and there were no bio intros. There was no 5 minute breather. It was just the different stories back to back. And I was very intent on wanting to hear what my colleagues' stories were. So I was very present and in the moment with the other performances because that's what I wanted. I wanted to be there to support everybody and not just be there for my own purpose. And so when I got on stage, I realized I just need a minute. I need a minute to like recenter, especially because the story before me was a very touching story about somebody losing their sister. So I just wanted to center myself and kind of a little bit clear the story that I just listened to. And that was part of how do I set myself up for success. And I say this all the time to my clients, which is like, hey, when you have a meeting, when you're having a difficult conversation, sometimes you need to pause in it. Or sometimes you need to make sure you give yourself space right before that meeting so that you can center. And that's exactly what I did here. And, sure, there was a part of me going, is this weird? I'm taking like literally, it was probably not even 30 seconds to breathe. That was super helpful for me. And what was really awesome was later on after my story, somebody came up to me and said, I really loved how you took your pause. She said, because not only did it allow you to center yourself, but it gave the audience a moment to pause because of the emotional journey that they had been going through. So that was definitely affirmation that what was good for me was also what was good for the audience. And I say this all the time too, right? Like if it's in your best interest, it will be in the best interest of those around you. That's just kind of one of the laws that I believe in. All right. So I gave the performance and I felt really good. I felt like, oh my gosh, I killed it. I did my best. And when I got off the stage, I allowed myself to receive the impact from the audience, the claps, the hug from my best friends and my husband, and their whispering that I killed it, all the things. And I did let that in. I think that's part of the process of just regardless of how I felt about my performance, that I could sit there and say, I receive how other people are responding to it. And that is their truth. And I want to receive that too. And look, I also got some critical feedback within the experience of that day. And because I was so grounded and because I was so clear on what my goals and my intent was, and because I was so particular about what my objective was with the talk and how I chose to go about it and what techniques and what tools, that when I got that feedback, I was able to decide if that was something I agreed with or not. I was able to be discerning even in that moment and not let it spin me or spool me because I was very clear about my choices and how I do my craft. And that was a blessing to me because look, in my past, that may not have been the case. I may have crumbled by getting critical feedback in the moment before I even had time to let the performance even sit. Here's the thing, I didn't win. I didn't make it to the next round, but I really had prepared myself for it. And the way I prepared myself for it, I've already shared with you, right? I prepared by really honoring what are my goals? What are the goals that I have that I am in control of? What was really my intent of participating in this whole thing? But at the end of the day, right? It didn't quote unquote work out. I didn't get everything that I wanted, right? Because I didn't get to move on to the next round. And so, what I do in those situations, and what I'm kind of inviting you to do, is to take those things that didn't work out and use it as an opportunity for deep reflection about what that experience offered you, what you learned, and how you grew. And what I learned about myself, there were some things that I already knew, and there were other things that it just reconfirmed what I already know about myself, right? So, what I learned about myself, or relearned rather, is that, yeah, I don't like to operate in tight boxes, in rules with time pressures and all those things when it comes to most things in life, but also like my craft. I relearned, yeah, I don't like competitions because my preference is to show up as my best self, and that I do believe everybody wins all the time. Like there is no scarcity about growth and about forward movement in whatever your goals are. And I think in this society and this world, we are just taught that we're supposed to be competitive. And I think it's one thing to be competitive against yourself and another thing to be competitive with others. And I just prefer to be a cheerleader for everybody. And so I just relearned that. I also further grounded in my belief that my sole purpose is to serve the audience always. And that was my priority 100% of the time. That I could have made other choices based on, oh, what were the kind of guidelines and what were the rules and what were they looking for? But I always came back to, well, what is actually going to be the best service of the audience? And that was my guidepost. And I also really remember and relearned that letting go of the perfect script, letting go of how I want it to go is really hard. And I have to give myself lots of space to let go from my head and drop into my heart space. And I think that this counsel and this advice is so important for when we have high stakes conversations, when we're interviewing, when we're doing anything that even requires some expertise and some structure. Because what happens is when we give ourselves permission to let go of are we doing it right and give ourselves permission to be embodied and to be operating from our heart space, so much magic is possible from that place. We are able to be in flow and we are able to respond to what's happening in the moment so much better than being hung up on, am I doing this right? Or being hung up on, did I say the exact thing I wanted to say? Did I, you know what I mean? Like, this is a big part of, for me, doing that review and saying, right, what is important to me? And if and when I get on stage again, not if, but when, that process comes and there's a high stakes situation, I have to remind myself, girl, 2 days before the thing, put the script down, put all the details down, and just enjoy yourself and be in the moment. So I walk you through, right, this whole process. And my intent today was to share with you, well, what do you do when things don't work out? And I'm going to talk to you about that next. But the reason why I walk you through my whole process was because it is so much easier to use those tools for what to do when things don't work out when you have done everything you can in the process to set yourself up for success, to be really clear about your goals and intentions, to be really clear about what you're there to do, and to honor what you need. Because then when things don't work out, it's so much easier to sit there and say, well, shit, man, I did everything. You know what I mean? And look, I think when things don't work out, sure, you might need to take that space to grieve and just feel your feelings. Absolutely. That's important. And don't just stuff them. Don't just move right on by to the next thing, because what you're doing is you're missing a huge opportunity to really grow even more from that experience and to honor yourself even more. So, what I do when things don't work out is, yeah, I allow my feelings, and that can be a roller coaster ride. At first, I was totally fine. I was like, oh my gosh, I did the best. The audience was super in it, engaged. I got great feedback, really touching feedback, not just, oh, hey, great job, but oh my gosh, you moved me and you touched me. But later on, as it sank in and the winner was announced in social media, I was like, I was bummed. I was like, oh man, it's too bad it didn't work out. So allowing for that process to unfold, because how you feel immediately may change 3 days later, a week later, or whatever. And so sitting with the feelings is a big part of, what do you do when things don't work out? And like I just walked through, it's like, remember and review how you grew in the experience. What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about what your preferences are? What did you learn about what works for you? What did you learn about how you set yourself up for success? And was there something that you would do differently next time? And that goes back to, did you practice like you play? Did you go all in, or did you maybe skirt around? Why didn't it work out? Maybe some of these things came into play. And did you give yourself permission to receive even when things didn't work out? Right. So maybe you got some feedback from an interview that said, you were amazing, et cetera, et cetera. We realized we were looking for something slightly different. Can you sit there and say, all right, well, no, I was showing up and sharing my gifts, and people could see that and appreciate it. Are you able to receive that piece of the process and the experience versus throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, right? And when things don't work out, do you give yourself permission to celebrate yourself with the process that you went through and not just the outcome? Like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, yes, I'm celebrating that. I gave myself permission to get my makeup done professionally, to get my hair done, to give myself space on my calendar to make sure I was able to do the inner work and the technical work required to show up as my best self. And when things don't work out, remember that the rules that you are being judged on may have nothing to do with actually how talented you are. Was there even criteria? Do you even know what really, really folks were looking for? Again, let's just take this interview process, right? Like, you have no idea what was going on behind the scenes, right? So when things don't work out, are you pointing the finger at yourself, or are you saying, you know what? God only knows what was happening that I don't know about, and honoring that there's going to be pieces of the puzzle that we don't know. The same thing goes for me in this competition. There was definitely pieces of that puzzle that I don't know. And it doesn't matter in a way, because I come back to self celebration, and I come back to being my own best friend and supporting myself through the journey that I'm quite proud of. I think the other piece about what to do when things don't work out is honor if and when you need to take a break and reset. We can go through really difficult experiences where we didn't get what we wanted. We didn't get the job. We didn't get the house. We didn't get the apartment. The relationship ended, all the things. And sometimes we just jump right into the next thing because it gives us comfort, it gives us this sense of control of, well, fine, I'm going to go make it happen then. I'm going to try again. And that's great. And I want you to do that. But sometimes what your heart and soul needs is give me a minute, give me a minute to reset, give me a minute to just process and fill my cup up so I can go out there again and do the thing. You know what I'm saying? So I hope that me walking through this has been helpful for you to say, what can I do for myself when I have high stakes things coming up? What can I do for myself to be clear with my intent and my goals before I even start so that whatever happens, whatever the outcome is, that I can handle it with grace and with support of myself because these things will happen. We're not always gonna get the thing. We're not always gonna land the plane. We're not always going to achieve what it is that we want on our timeline. So having tools in a toolbox for what to do when it didn't work out is really important. And one of the things I didn't mention was having a journal and journaling out your feelings. For some people, it's easier to write it out than it is to just sit with the feeling or just, sometimes it's easier to name the feeling. And all of that is a part of what do we do with that disappointment? It's a whole new season right now. We are fully into spring. And maybe some things didn't work out yet for you this year. Maybe January, February, beginning of March was rough. So maybe now is a good time to take stock of what didn't work. What are those last vestiges of processing that will support you? Because it's a new season and you get to have all your dreams come true. You get to have what you desire, what you deserve. But sometimes we have to do some clearing so that the next time the opportunity presents itself, we can handle it even better. We can rise above even further and we can land that plane because we haven't dismissed our disappointments. We haven't dismissed where we fell short, but we said, let me learn from this. Let me grow from this. Let me take the lesson so I don't have to learn it again. Because I believe that the universe will keep giving you the same experiences over and over until you truly learn the lesson and you truly stopped whatever pattern is not serving you. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope you use this as a tool you can come back to time and time again to plan for your highest good and to accept what happens in your life is meant to be. I truly believe that what's meant for you won't pass you by. And that's how I feel about that competition. If it was meant for me, it wouldn't have passed me by. And I still have no idea all the magic that will come from that experience, the connections that I made, the deepening of connections I already have. Like I can see some of this already. And I think that comes back to this idea of, well, being unattached to outcomes is so helpful because we don't know necessarily what that exact experience was meant to be for us. Clearly, the experience wasn't meant for me to win, but there was something else that was more beneficial for me in this. And I'm going to continue to discover that. And I'm already honoring what was there for me. And I think that that's what helps us get through the difficult times, what is here for me, and continuing to look at how things unfold and say, gosh, yes, this was a huge benefit to me. Like, for example, I'm getting like these professional photos from this experience. Like, that's a huge benefit and that's a win. So I'm clocking all the wins that I can to remind myself that, yeah, my intuition said, go do this thing. And some great things happened as a result. All right. Well, I've been yapping on for a hot minute now. I'm so glad you're here with me. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, rate, and review on whatever platform you're listening on. And listen, if you want to be a sponsor of this podcast, you are welcome to reach out to me. We can do a 30-second, 15-second ad, whatever, for your products or services. I would love to engage with you on that. And if this is something that you think somebody you know would benefit from, please forward this episode or this podcast to them because I'm here to make a difference and make an impact. And your help in creating that ripple effect is so, So appreciated. So thank you for tuning in to the Unlock Lab, and ciao for now.